And so there's some group of people, secular humanists and others, who have those beliefs of, hey, let's do good, be charitable, and not kill people, absent of any religiosity at all. They are just convinced of these, and they have a community that shares those ideals and helps to encourage those ideals in others without having to appeal to a God. That doesn't fit into either of the categories you talked about.
Right, I understand that. But, for example, citing marginal cases does not somehow refute the general trend, just because this is about as convincing as if I try to turn you into a Christian by using my personal testimony. Just because it works for you, it does not mean it's going to work for everyone, and it's not going to work for the general population. The overwhelming amount of data does show, for example, studies have shown that joining a weekly recreational sport is good for you. I am a super introvert. That gives me anxiety just thinking of going out and meeting with people for more than an hour. So it probably would not be good for me. It would probably cause depression, make me tired.
I'm not appealing to outliers. I'm not appealing to outliers.
Because secular humanism is a small category. And saying, look at all the secular humanists, we can do good without it. Okay, that doesn't show that's actually scientifically backed. Just because there are marginal cases does not refute the general trend.
Okay, well, if you want to write off the bulk of secular humanism as if it's just some kind of freakish outlier, when what we're really talking about is, here's an idea. Can you communicate this idea to someone and get them to accept it without appealing to a God? Yes, you can. We do it all the time. I convince people to leave their religion and maintain good values and get rid of the bad ones all the time. So when we talk about, is religion a positive influence on society? My answer initially of yes. I would now change that and say no. Because if intrinsic religiosity is tied up into believing in the virgin birth and resurrection in God, none of those things are necessary to actually teaching someone how to live a better life and how to be a better person. So it's not the religious ideas that are good, it is the good ideas that are good. And what I've said for years now is, take the good wherever you find it, even within religions, and get rid of the rest of it. Because the virgin birth or resurrection, those things have nothing to do with whether or not I should give somebody a sandwich or knit a hat for them or do these other sorts of good. They're irrelevant apart from the possibility of saying, you better do this or God will stamp you out. And then what you've done is you've set up a situation where when somebody gets to a point where they don't think there's a God, they no longer have a motivation to do good. It's like having two kids at dinner who are acting up, and you tell one of them that, if you keep acting up, I'm going to beat you. And you tell the other one, if you keep acting up, I'm going to, or if you stop, I'll get you dessert. They don't behave when the parents are gone. You haven't taught them proper values. You've just given them a carrot and a stick.
Okay, again, you're basically saying, look, I've convinced people that they can be good without religion. Okay, good for you. Okay, marginal case, citing your personal experience, your personal testimony, and saying, look, I can do it without religion. Other people can too. Therefore, we don't need it. That's not a scientific basis. That's not going on what studies actually say. For example, there's a lot of people who don't believe that they would have an ethical foundation without religion. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole moral debate here right now. What I'm saying is what they believe is that if you take away religion, there would be no ethical foundation. And the studies back that up. Just because there are some people like you and your friends and other people you have convinced, they say, we can do this without intrinsic religion. That doesn't mean that's true for society in general and for most people as well. Most people tend to say that there needs to be some sort of intrinsic religious foundation to motivate them to do these sorts of things, whether you believe it or not. Now, you're just saying, yeah, I see that in society, but that doesn't actually – I see that in society, but I can do it without religion. Okay, good for you. That doesn't mean everyone else can. That's very close to arguing from incredulity.
It's very close to being monumentally arrogant and suggesting that somehow those of us who've managed to do it are better than those other people. The fact that – so the idea is – this claim that we've heard forever, some people need religion. There are people who believe they need religion. There are people who believe that if they didn't believe what their religion teaches, they would run around raping and killing. I'm not convinced that they actually would. I think this is a protective mechanism from religion because what we see over and over again from the clergy project, from the hundreds of ministers who are either active in the pulpit, who are left the pulpit, from the countless thousands of people who show up at atheist and secular events around, these people are not, by and large, any more immoral than anyone else.
Okay, well, if it is a protective mechanism, I want to see some actual data to back that up, and it's not actually true. as far as the study showed, their actual beliefs are that, if you remove the religious foundation, there would be no reason to show that. And
But
so for you just to say, I don't really believe you when you say what you actually are saying, I think it's just a protective mechanism, that is completely unfounded. There's no data to back it up.
Hang on. First of all, when I ask people this, if I say, hey, if you stop believing in God, would you run around and rape and kill? There are people who have legitimately said yes. Do you think they actually would?
I honestly am not going to jump inside and psychoanalysis people.
This is not psychoanalysis. This is about which is more likely, that they are actually wanting to go out and rape and kill people, but a God or a belief in a God prevents them, or that they are so convinced of this God as a deterrent that they want to portray the idea that they would go out and rape and kill. Well, we know enough about human psychology to know that people who are in a church who believe in a God, if they stop believing, are not actually likely to run around and rape and kill people, that we have societal motivations to stop that.
This is an extreme example. Okay, most of the studies are not focusing on raping and killing people. They're just focusing on ethical behavior like self-control, psychopathic tendencies, increased crime. Sure, I don't think people are going to run around. If I found out tomorrow there is no God, I'm not going to run around and start raping people. But I don't think my ethical behavior would be exactly the same. I don't think I would really – I'd focus more on what I would want to get, and I would try to do whatever I can to possibly do that. So, for example, for you to just say, I don't believe that they would just be as good without religion, there's no data or science to back that up. You can't psychoanalyze people based on what you want to be true or what you think is true about them.
No. I'm not psychoanalyzing people. I'm looking at psychological norms of what we know about human behavior, that the people just don't. There's not that high of a percentage of people who have those kind of psychopathic tendencies in the first place. There's no, just because studies can show a correlation between intrinsic religiosity and reduced crime rate or pick your statistic, doesn't mean that we have to fear the idea that if people gave that up, that they would suddenly be worse.
Well, the studies are going further than saying correlation, as I said. I mean, for example, the study on crime, If You Love Me, Keep My Commandments, a meta-analysis of the effects of religion of crime, does go so far as to say that it does exert a moderate deterrent effect on individuals. It's not some of them going further than saying that it's just a correlation. They're saying this does deter. So for you to say, well, we can just remove that and everything will be humpty-dory, that's not entirely true.
It is, because the fact that X acts as a deterrent does not mean that Y does not. And when we have evidence that Y also acts as a deterrent, you don't get to say that we need to keep X.
We need to show data that Y is going to be as a strong deterrent. You just can't say, well, I believe it will be.
I think we've shown it enough to have good reason to not think, to be able to realize from all the people that we've introduced to secular humanism and to secular other moral systems that aren't tied to religiosity, we know that their behavior is not necessarily a threat risk. Now, when you say which is better, okay, which is better at discouraging certain behaviors or encouraging certain behaviors, I don't know how you can say that one is better when one of them has had this incredibly long, privileged de facto status in society, and the other one has barely even started running, and yet has produced positive effects.
Okay. Again, I'm going to beat this drum until it dies. We need to see actual data that shows that, look, we have this meta-analysis that shows religion versus crime, but luckily we have this other meta-analysis which shows secular humanism also reduces crime. I would want to see some studies. And what you say, we know, when you say the phrase, we know, that, I mean, you're basically saying, from my experience, from the people I've converted, I have seen the ethical behavior stay the same. Okay, well, again, there are marginal cases, but you cannot make an objective claim based from your own experience. That's basically arguing from incredulity.
We're kind of going on a little bit over an hour now. I think this is kind of a good time to actually maybe address some questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Some of these I have written, and I'm trying to get some from the live chat myself. I'm listening to your guys' dialogue here. So what you were just talking about, let me ask IP especially, why do not we see more people when they lose their faith? We don't see a huge paradigm shift in their ethical standards and their morality and their framework of morals. We basically see them just lose their faith and they continue on their lives as they normally do. If what you're saying is true as far as these studies, would you not expect to see people that have lost faith to have a huge change in how they go about their daily lives and live their life morally or immorally?
Well, what foundation would that be from? Where you say that I mean, are you saying that? Oh, I've seen people. Okay, well that's great. I've seen people lose their faith too, and they're really good people. For example, I have a cousin, great fan of Matt Dillahunty. In fact, he was the first person who showed me Matt Dillahunty's stuff. He's a great father. He's a great husband. He's a great person. He's an atheist. So what? There are marginal cases, but overall in society in general, we have to go on what science says. We just can't say, look, I have all these friends I have from my experience. I need to see something more than saying, look at this. Yeah, and again, there are people that do find other variables which cause them to get ethical behavior, for example. I'm not denying that. The question is what happens on society as a whole.
I have a problem with calling these marginal cases. I don't know what justification you can say that they're marginal cases if we're both acknowledging that there hasn't been either the time or the study to show the proper effect of secular humanism. It seems a little weaselly to just dismiss this as marginal cases. What if, as the world continues for religion to decline and the nuns, the NONEs, continue to increase, at what point do we get to recognize that it's no longer marginal? But the other aspect is I can identify specific doctrines within religion which are harmful and wrong, which diminish the value of things, as I was talking about with hospitals and stuff. Has anyone identified values within secular humanism that risk poisoning good efforts in the same way that religion does?
Well, yeah, it's underlying. People have argued based on the underlying truth foundations that you could lead to nihilistic tendencies. Now, you obviously don't agree with that, but other people have disagreed. And I have talked to people who have become nihilistic because they become atheists.
I know lots of people who have. I'm not at all saying that that's not one of the potential outcomes.
Okay, well, then you acknowledge there is some risk factor as well. You said there was some risk factor with religion, and here you're acknowledging there's a risk factor with secular humanism. So I don't see what you're trying to point out there.
There's nothing about secular humanist principles that leads to nihilism, but the fact that what I'm saying is that there are people who have left their religion who become nihilistic.
No, I was talking about being secular human. I'm talking about people who I've spoken to who were atheistic secular humanists, and they became very nihilistic. They became anti-natalist even. Sure,
but you can't say that their nihilism is caused by some principle of secular humanism.
So what you're saying is that when we are studying individuals, we should look at the multifactorial variables going into them and not just assume it's one variable causing it.
That's pretty much what I've said all night.
Then that's my point when it comes to attribution errors and blaming this stuff on religion.
And I think, that was my point with regard to attribution errors, with regard to giving religions credit for that, when in fact the good idea of, hey, let's feed the homeless is not in any way a required tenet of a religion. There are certainly...
The difference is I actually have studies showing that it is causing that sort of stuff. You on the other hand, don't. So one of us has studies, one of us doesn't. We can yell attribution error back and forth, but I'm going on what the scientific study says. This is why I cited them, gave you the titles. I have a lot of the PDFs. You can look at them yourself.
Yeah, except that there is nothing about feed the homeless that is necessarily tied to a religion, because you can do that without. So as I acknowledge, you can encourage people to feed the homeless from a standpoint of a religion. You can also do it from secular humanism. You can also do it from holding a gun to their head. You can encourage people to do things for many, many, many reasons. I've never said that even at the outset with my yes is, can it do a positive thing? I'm looking at the net and saying, when we look at religiosity, and when you're talking about intrinsic religiosity and having to believe things like virgin birth and resurrection, et cetera, my primary concern is whether it's true, but I'm not convinced that those actually produce any positive results. The facets within religions that produce positive results aren't contingent upon the religion. They are good ideas that would be good whether there's a God or not, whether there's a holy book or not.
Well, again, going back to the feed the homeless thing, yeah, of course, you can encourage people to feed the homeless through all sorts of means. The question a lot of these psychologists ask is,